Have you ever felt like your body is working against you? That even though you eat less, cut out sweets, and push yourself on the treadmill, that belly fat doesn't move a single millimeter? Let me tell you a truth that very few people say in the fitness world. Your body doesn't burn calories. It responds to commands. And the ones giving those commands, the ones holding the pen and writing the destiny of every meal you eat, are your hormones. If your control panel is out of balance, you can close your mouth as much as you want, but your body will keep receiving the direct order to store fat right there between your vital organs. Visceral fat is not a mathematical miscalculation. It's a biological response to distorted chemical messages. When your hormones are out of balance, your biology understands that storing fat is the only way to survive. Today, I'm going to open the black box of your metabolism and show you the 4 hormones that are, right at this very moment, sabotaging your waistline and blocking your energy. But more than pointing fingers, I'm going to teach you how to regain control of this panel so you can finally unlock fat burning in a natural way. Hello, I'm Dr. Harrison Blake. I'm a medical specialist. And in 15 years of medical practice, I've learned that weight loss is not mathematics. It's hormonal biology. If you want to stop fighting the scale and truly understand how your body works from the inside out, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I want control of my hormones. In 15 years of medicine, I've lost count of how many patients I've seen who were frustrated because they couldn't lose weight even though they were eating healthy. What they didn't know was that their insulin levels were constantly high. To make it easier to understand, imagine that each fat cell in your body is a lock safe. Insulin is the key. When you eat refined carbohydrates, sugar, or even large amounts of protein at once, your pancreas releases insulin to remove sugar from the bloodstream and carry it into the cells. The problem is that insulin has a double function. While it opens the door for sugar to enter the cell, it locks the door for fat to leave. As long as high levels of insulin are circulating in your blood, your body receives the biological command for total storage. It's as if the orchestra conductor were directing only the storage section while completely silencing the fat-burning section. If your insulin is high, you could run a marathon, but your body would rather burn your muscle or leave you exhausted before allowing a single drop of visceral fat to be used as fuel. The situation gets worse when we develop what is called insulin resistance. Think of it like a lock that has become old and jammed from being used too much. As your cells stop responding to insulin, your pancreas, in panic, starts producing even more keys. Now you have an excess of insulin circulating all the time, even when you're not eating. This creates an environment where visceral fat is constantly being fed. That's why many people develop that prominent hard belly. It's the result of years of high insulin forcing storage between the organs. Many diets focus only on eating less. But if you eat less while still stimulating insulin with small carbohydrate snacks throughout the day, you'll never lower this hormone enough for your body to switch into burn mode. Visceral fat is particularly sensitive to insulin. It has a higher density of receptors for this hormone than fat in the legs or arms. That's why when insulin rises, your belly is the first place to grow and the last place to shrink. Understanding the role of insulin removes the burden of guilt. It's not that you lack willpower. It's that you're trying to open a safe while the key is turned to the lock position. In 15 years of practice, I've seen that the foundation of any lasting weight loss around the abdomen necessarily involves lowering insulin levels and restoring cellular sensitivity. When the conductor stops giving the command to store, the body finally feels a biological freedom to begin using belly fat reserves as the energy source they were meant to be. If insulin is a conductor of storage, cortisol is the architect that decides exactly where that fat will be built. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone, produced by the adrenal glands. In the right doses and at the right times, it is vital. It wakes us up in the morning, gives us focus, and prepares the body to respond to challenges. The problem with modern life is that we live in a state of chronic low-grade stress. It's the bill that won't get paid, the traffic jam that never moves, the constant notifications on your phone. This state keeps cortisol continuously elevated, and that is a disaster for your waistline. Why does cortisol focus on the belly? The explanation is evolutionary. For our ancestors, stress meant physical danger or food scarcity. The body, in its infinite survival wisdom, understands that it must protect the vital organs at any cost. Visceral fat, because it is close to the liver and heart, is the fastest source of energy to mobilize in an emergency. That's why when cortisol rises, it orders the body to pull energy from your muscles, arms, and legs, and deposit it strategically in the abdomen. That's why many stressed individuals develop what we call a spider body, thin arms and legs but a prominent abdomen. In 15 years of clinical practice, I see this pattern repeat every day. Elevated cortisol does something even worse. It stimulates the liver to produce glucose even if you haven't eaten sugar. It breaks down your muscle proteins and converts them into sugar to provide energy for the fight. And what does this excess sugar in the bloodstream do? It stimulates insulin. In other words, chronic stress places you in a cycle where you constantly produce internal sugar and store that sugar as belly fat through insulin. It's the perfect combination for abdominal weight gain that no diet seems able to fix. In addition, high cortisol changes your eating behavior. It shuts down the logical part of your brain and activates the reward system. When you are stressed, you don't crave a salad. You feel a biological urge to eat comfort foods, rich in fat and sugar. Cortisol hijacks your taste preferences because the brain wants quick energy and immediate pleasure to cope with pressure. If you try to follow a restrictive diet and perform exhausting aerobic workouts while your cortisol is high, you only create more stress in the body, which ironically may cause your belly to grow even more. Another critical point is sleep. Cortisol and melatonin, the sleep hormone, work like a seesaw. When one rises, the other falls. If your cortisol is high at night due to stress or excessive screen use, you never reach deep sleep. Without deep sleep, you do not produce growth hormone GH, which is a powerful fat burner. The result is that you wake up more inflamed, with more insulin resistance, and with cortisol even higher to compensate for fatigue. It is a cycle that locks your metabolism into storage mode. Understanding cortisol is liberating because you realize that sometimes the best exercise to lose belly fat is not running on a treadmill, but learning how to breathe, sleep better, and give your body signals of safety. As long as your organism feels under attack, it will hold on to every gram of visceral fat as if it were life insurance. To shrink the belly, we must first convince your hormonal system that the war is over and that it is safe to release the reserves. Imagine that your body has a thermostat for hunger, controlled by two main messengers that work in a constant tug of war, leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is produced by your own fat cells. Its function is to travel to your brain and say, "Doctor, we have enough inventory down here. You can turn off hunger and start burning energy." In theory, the more visceral fat you have, the more leptin you produce and the less hungry you should feel. But in reality, those with more abdominal fat often experience a much stronger and harder to control hunger. Why does this logic fail? The problem is a phenomenon called leptin resistance. When you have a lot of visceral fat and live in a constant state of inflammation, as we discussed earlier, leptin production becomes so high and so frequent that your brain begins to ignore the signal. It's like trying to talk during a rock concert. The noise is so loud that you simply stop hearing it. Your brain becomes deaf to the satiety signal. For your hypothalamus, it's as if you were in a state of starvation, even while carrying 20 or 30 pounds of reserve around your waist. Because the brain thinks you are starving, it does two things. It desperately increases your appetite and slows down your metabolism to conserve what remains. On the other side of the rope is ghrelin, the hunger hormone produced mainly in the stomach. Ghrelin is that rumbling sensation you feel when you go too long without eating. In a healthy metabolism, ghrelin rises before a meal and drops sharply after you eat. However, when you have high insulin levels and poor sleep, ghrelin remains elevated even after you have eaten a full meal. You finish a large plate of food, and 30 minutes later you are searching the cupboard for something sweet. That is not stomach hunger. It is a hormonal imbalance where ghrelin is shouting and leptin cannot be heard. In 15 years of clinical practice, I have seen that this imbalance is what destroys any calorie-counting diet. If your hormonal system is sending emergency hunger signals, your willpower will lose the battle every single time. Leptin resistance creates a compulsion for foods that deliver immediate pleasure, sugar and trans fats, because the brain is seeking a chemical reward to cope with the stress of thinking it is running out of energy. It is a cycle of biological self-sabotage. Belly fat produces a signal that confuses the brain, and confused brain forces you to eat more to increase belly fat. In addition, lack of sleep, which we mentioned earlier when discussing cortisol, is the main fuel for this tug of war. Just one night of poor sleep increases ghrelin levels and decreases leptin levels the next day. You wake up with about 20% more hunger and 15% less satiety. That is why after a bad night's sleep, your resistance to sweets and bread disappears. Your body is trying to use food to compensate for the lack of hormonal restoration from sleep. To win this tug of war and shrink visceral fat, simply closing your mouth and suffering is not enough. We need to restore the brain sensitivity to leptin. This only happens when we reduce inflammation in the body and stabilize insulin levels. When communication is restored, compulsive hunger disappears naturally. You begin eating because your body needs nutrients, not because your brain is in panic mode. Restoring leptin sensitivity gives your body back the intelligence to know when to stop, turning weight loss from torture into a fluid and logical physiological process. Have you noticed that many people, when they reach their 40s or 50s, start gaining belly fat even while maintaining the same habits they've had their entire lives? It seems as if the body changes its storage map. This happens because of the natural and sometimes accelerated decline of our sex hormones, testosterone in men and estrogen and progesterone in women. In 15 years of clinical practice, I explained that these hormones act like shields that keep fat away from your vital organs. When those shields drop, visceral fat advances. In women, the transition into menopause brings a dramatic drop in estrogen. Estrogen plays a fundamental role in fat distribution. It tends to direct fat storage toward the hips and thighs, the well-known gynoid fat, which is metabolically far less dangerous. When estrogen levels fall, the body loses that directional command. The result? Fat that once went to the legs begins migrating directly to the abdomen. In addition, the drop in progesterone increases fluid retention and anxiety, which raises cortisol and creates that perfect storm that favors rapid belly growth. In men, the main villain is a decline in testosterone, often called andropause. Testosterone is a hormone that maintains muscle mass and signals the body to burn visceral fat. When levels drop, metabolism slows and the body loses the ability to maintain muscle, which is the biggest consumer of glucose. Even worse, belly fat itself contains an enzyme called aromatase that converts the little testosterone a man still has into estrogen. In other words, the more belly fat a man has, the less testosterone he will have, and the less testosterone he has, the more the belly grows. It is a cycle of metabolic feminization that robs masculine vitality and strength. But why is this so dangerous? Because these hormones are not only for reproduction, they are metabolic protectors. Testosterone and estrogen help maintain insulin sensitivity. Without them, your body becomes insulin resistant much faster, even if you don't eat that much sugar. That's why the menopause belly or the beer belly, which is often just low testosterone, is so difficult to lose with simple walking. You are trying to fight a structural shift in your internal chemistry. In 15 years of medicine, I've learned that we cannot ignore this phase of life. Hormonal decline causes the body to lose a workforce needed to burn fat. However, that does not mean you are doomed. It means that your standards for sleep, strength training, and nutrition must rise. What worked when you were 20 no longer works, because the orders your hormones are giving now are different. Understanding this migration of fat is a first step to stop punishing yourself. You didn't become lazy. Your hormonal environment changed. The good news is that by adjusting the pillars of your lifestyle, and in some cases with specific medical support, we can signal to the body that it still needs to maintain muscle and that fat is not welcome in the abdomen. Restoring this balance is like giving your metabolism its shields back, allowing you to age with a healthy waistline and high energy. The first step to regain control of your panel is to tame the conductor, insulin. To do this, you don't need a starvation diet, but rather a low glycemic load diet. The secret lies in the order of what you eat. Always start with fiber and protein. Leave carbohydrates for the end of the meal. This creates a filter in your stomach that prevents sugar from rising too quickly in the bloodstream, avoiding that insulin spike that locks fat burning. Another powerful tool is strategic intermittent fasting. By giving your body windows of 14 or 16 hours without food, you allow insulin levels to drop low enough for the body to finally access energy from the storage around your belly. For cortisol, the secret is not simply stop stressing, which is often impossible, but managing how your body reacts to stress. Magnesium and vitamin C are fundamental here. Magnesium helps relax the central nervous system, while vitamin C helps the adrenal glands process stress. In addition, replace that exhausting hour of cardio with short, intense strength training sessions or light outdoor walks. Excessive cardio when you're already stressed only increases cortisol. Strength training, on the other hand, helps boost testosterone and improve insulin sensitivity, fighting two saboteurs at once. To restore leptin sensitivity and lower ghrelin, your greatest ally is quality sleep. If you don't sleep, you won't lose belly fat. Try to maintain a consistent sleep routine, turning off blue lights at least an hour before bedtime. Supplements like omega-3 are also excellent for reducing inflammation in the hypothalamus, allowing the brain to hear leptin again, so you can experience real satiety. When communication is restored, that compulsive craving for sweets simply disappears. Finally, to protect your sex hormones, focus on consuming healthy fats. Testosterone and estrogen are produced from cholesterol. Avocados, eggs, olive oil, and nuts provide the raw materials your body needs to produce these protective shields. If you follow a zero-fat diet, you are cutting off the supply needed to maintain the hormones that keep your muscle mass and fat burning active. Rebalancing hormones is a process that requires patience and consistency. You are communicating with your body through your daily choices. Every time you choose real food, sleep an extra hour, or complete a strength workout, you are turning the knobs on your control panel toward health and vitality. It's not about being perfect. It's about giving your body the security it needs to finally release visceral fat. We have reached the end of this deep dive into your hormonal command center. I hope that from today onward you look at your abdominal fat not as a sign of personal failure, but as a cry for help from your hormones. Your body is not your enemy. It is an incredible biological machine that has spent years simply following chemical orders to store energy. Now that you understand the roles of insulin, cortisol, leptin, and the impact of time on your sex hormones, you hold a map to change those orders. Shrinking your belly is the natural result of a body that has regained balance. By adjusting your sleep, your nutrition, and your movement, you are sending a new message. It is safe to burn energy. Metabolic freedom is the ability to live without the burden of constant hunger and chronic fatigue. I am Dr. Harrison Blake. If this content helped you understand what really happens behind your measuring tape, share this video with someone who needs to stop fighting the scale. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment, "I've taken command." See you at the next level of health. See you in the next video.